Good evening, everybody. We are very happy to welcome you at the new episode of something that we gave a title in French. The title is Circuit Fantôme. So Circuit Fantôme is a link to something like sort of an activity that we run together. I'm very happy that Daniel doesn't like when I call it curating. So I call it Daniel likes the putting things together. Together, we put things together since 2018. That was our first acousmonium. We always love to have roundtables, where people not just put their personal thoughts together, but also sort of put them in sometimes in a confrontation, sometimes a concordance or discordance. But it's always very nice because the new or some unexpected things may emerge. And in particular, so it was 1 hour of talk and then phrases or thoughts I found there myself, I keep using until now. And that one was for Français, the inventor of the acousmonium, somebody we enjoy sort of developing and following. And then at some point when we came to this discussion, like what is the natural habitat, what is the birth connected identity of us, of our music, and is it the radio, is it the theater, is this the concert, blah, blah, blah. So Whale said that no, it's more like that we are nomads, we are bastards, we're unrecognized kids. So this is like we form the ghost, the ghost circuit. Yeah, so we attach our ideas and our practice of the existing institutions, existing galleries. It's depending like where this works, and I love that he used this kind of French expression, which is Circuit Fantôme. So we decided to entitle this series Circuit Fantôme because we just reopened the Floating Sound Gallery in Vienna, and we are hosted, thanks to them, by our dear friends. This is a place called Vronihof. And this is Circuit Fantôme Season 1. I would love Daniel to really introduce the program and how did we make it. Daniel Teruggi.
Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm very happy to be here with you this evening in Vienna. I'm actually in Paris, where I live and where I develop my activity. Sorry for the visual interferences. I'm Daniel Teruggi. I'm a composer born in Argentina. I have been living in France for the last 45 years. And of the 45 years, 40 of them correspond to me being a part of the Groupe de Recherche Musicale, the GRM, founded by Pierre Schaeffer in 1952, 58 actually, but was an earlier version in 52. And I was director of this institution for 20 years until I retired. And so I have a good knowledge of the electroacoustical musical world in Europe and in all over the world. And I have met hundreds of composers and very happy to have listened to so nice and interesting music during my life. And so, as Anton says, we have had a long-running collaboration. And what I enjoy the most is that every now and then, Anton asks me to propose some names, so I send him some names. So he spends a lot of time listening to the music of these people, and he says then, okay, I like it. So based on this old trajectory we have since 2018, we imagined this quite a unique experience. Unique because I think it's beautiful, and we should do this all the time. I mean, there should be 52 presentations like today per year. Every week there should be one. It's the only way to have things, to get people to know the music, to know people to know other composers, to understand that enormous creational activity that's going on around all over the world. And the difficulty is there are few opportunities for composers to show their music. So when all of a sudden there's an open place like Vronihof, I think it's wonderful. So we didn't know what was going to happen this year with our series of concerts. And finally, thanks to the help of the Institut Français, the French Cultural Institute, we could organize this series of concert presentations of composers. So I proposed a list to Anton. He said yes, and then I contacted the composers, including very important ones like François Bell or Pierre-Henri. It's not him because he passed away 5 years ago, but his family. And they were all charmed with the idea, and they immediately accepted the format which we are proposing. So the format is the following. On each weekend, there is, first of all, in each concert lasts 1 hour. The composer presents himself, presents his music. And this is not easy for composers to speak like that in front of a camera and say, okay, this is my music. This is how I do it and why I do it. And then they made a choice of different works. Mainly, the idea was to have octophonic works with 8 loudspeakers and 8 different sources on each loudspeaker. But not all composers composed this way. So there were some octophonic works, some that were not. And we have been running this series since the end of July, and I was the first one who ran it. And every weekend we have different composers, and each presentation, which is about 50 to 55 minutes, is repeated several times on Friday and several times on Saturday. And even if the room is small, it's not a concert hall, it's a concert room for 30 people, more or less. It is extremely interesting to see how people come, they stay, they listen, they stay for a second time, they discuss, they talk. And of course, all this with the extraordinary habits you have in Austria and in Germany to always have near you a little bottle of something that will help you get along with life. So this is what we have been planning. And we're planning to continue it all during September and maybe sometimes in October. And then next year we'll talk again. So thank you, Anton.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, this is the JRM. As I remember, there is a great interview that we recorded with François Bell in 2018 that I still had no time to really process and publish. And in particular, you mentioned that it's probably the oldest, like the longest, the sort of, I mean, he said that the art group of this originality that exists for such a longest period is probably exceptional in the human history. So
yeah, 52, it's going to be 70 years very soon. What is interesting is that between François Bell and myself, we have been running the GRM for 50 years. Only together. 2 people. No, independently. He was there as 30 years director, and then me, 20 years director. Yeah, so I mean, there was a kind of very strong continuity, and the fact that helps a lot to have a regular and activity in which you can project yourself towards the future.
There's much to be discovered still, and I mean, I'm very happy that we put our efforts together to show the works, and I think the program is potentially it's really fantastic. But speaking about the performance, because I mean, this is Arseny Avraamov, and the Siren Symphony is something also known as Symphony of Industrial Horns, as different ways to translate it into English. It also depends who translates that. Yeah. And so, fun fact is that I got to know Avraamov as I was like 22 years old student of the Thurman Center, because there was a connection. Because at the same time, like Leon Thurman and Arseny Avraamov, they sometimes shared the same institutions where they worked. Sometimes they didn't, but they shared the time and they shared the spirit of this kind of. So at some point, there's something I don't share with them, is this kind of ardent adherence to this sort of revolutionary ideas as they were pronounced by certain people, like Lenin, and but we always have to consider, at that point is when is sometimes more important than where or what. Yeah, so we have to always keep it in mind that something that you don't have a bigger picture, you don't know where it grows, but like the wish to change, the wish to develop. And of course, these people like Avraamov and Sholpo and Genkovsky and Theremin and Zakhanov, they were all approaching it from the ways of like basically recreating like the sort of the technology and the role of the technology. And there is a great article. I mean, unfortunately, I cannot remember right now the words from Avraamov, but this is the words from Maholinach, yeah, who it's a parallel branch. It's a European Laszlo Maholinach. He said that he was talking about the production / reproduction. So what does the technology do? You know, the phonograph recording. Production, reproduction. So reproduction is the documentation, production is art. It's something that Arseny Avraamov was very much into. So this is how I got to know him myself as a sort of a proto-father of a synthesis. Even before the electricity was there. So he was detuning the pianos, like 4 grand pianos to have around, into the microtonal system, not, in order not to play the microtonal music, but to make the synthesis and to play the frequencies. And later I got to know about the Siren Symphony. He's also one person behind the graphic sound and many other stuff. But what I wanted to ask you at this point, as in your times as a JRM employee and the director, have you had any connections, any contacts, or any maybe Avramovs?
I met Avraamov 6 months ago. I didn't have any information about him. I didn't know anything of what had been happening in Russia. So it was all a full surprise for me. Of course, I knew Theremin, but it's more as on the technological side, not on the musical side. And so I don't have it anymore. I found an article on the internet about early Russian music, and I was surprised that so many things have been happening. Mm-hmm. And then when I read that in 1922 or 23, he performed this industrial symphony, I was amazed with the project and with what I heard as a result of the project. For example, there is in the history of electroacoustic music, they speak a lot of the Italian futurists in the middle 20s, 1925, Marinetti and others who invented machines to intona rumori, machines that would make noise. But there's practically nothing interesting left as a musical example of the thought. It was more an intellectual movement than a real musical movement. And all of a sudden, do you find this person coming out of nowhere for me? And when I read his story, I mean, he really came up from nowhere and then appeared and not only thought this music, and we'll speak about it, but he managed to perform it, because performing that music is extremely difficult.
I think nowadays it's important to mention that the time when, the first time we performed this version of Sergey's reconstruction of the Siren Symphony was in 2010 in late August or /end early September in Kiev. And there was a Gogol festival, and I was happy to curate this sound art at Gogol Fest. We had a huge, fantastic pavilion at the garage of the Dovzhenko Film Studio, and this is how I spent a fantastic time, and I made a fantastic friends there. And this is how we got to know each other, I think, with Sergey. He was not there, but he sent us the piece, and there was his friend, Anna, who was there to take care that the pieces performed properly. So, Sergey, I'm very sorry that we talk. With Daniel, we can talk endlessly. This is what we always do. Welcome. I would love you to introduce yourself, and first of all, like your sort of personal take on your personal edit? How come that you have found this? What was like Daniel just introduced also before I also introduced, like how did I come to the, step by step to for the figure of this kind of very strange person of Arseny, Krasnokutsky, Avraamov, or Rev Ars Avr, revolutionary Arseny Avraamov, sometimes that he loved to call himself. And what was your approach to it? As a composer or through the media, or basically just tell us.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm also very happy to be here. And I'm, as Anton said, I'm a composer. And as a composer, of course, I was interested in and music history, and found Avraamov and this time of time beginning of the 20th century very interesting, because there was many interesting thing happens, as well as you said, Russolo, Avraamov, Schoenberg, and many others interesting things. And also in visual art, it was like a revolution. And perhaps first of all, and in my second university, I wrote about my master work about the Avraamov and Russolo, and then I made an article about it. It was printed in Music Opera in St. Petersburg magazine. And that's then we decided with Institute of Pro Arte Institute in St. Petersburg to make a reconstruction of this symphony. And I traveled in some studios in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, film studios, to find the samples of the horns. And I think it's very important to speak about the title of the piece, and I try to describe why I translated like this, because the original title is Symphonia Gudkov, and Gudok,
you would say whistle.
Yeah, you can say whistle, you can say horn, you can translate it like siren, but I found the problem with the siren, because siren, as we usually know, it has modulation. It has glissando up, glissando down, glissando up like a wave. And Avraamov instruments are not sirens. He used sirens as an additional instrument for his symphony. It's like something like background instrument sometimes, but main instruments are like horns, industrial horns, horns of factories, horns of lead, horns of trains, and that's why I decided to translate it in a bit another way. I like very much the title Siren Symphony or Symphony of Sirens. It's very beautiful, but there is a bit. Some people can expect something other if they read this title. And for example, if you know, there is another reconstruction of this symphony. It calls Siren Symphony. And they do it in Spain, this reconstruction, and the main instruments were sirens, and so it completely, let's say, break the idea of Avraamov, because it's completely different sounds, and from, for example, from the this kind of industrial halls, he built a very big organ, and to play some melodies. And if you try to play melodies on the sirens, it's impossible, because they have a modulation. On the horn, you can play melodies. it was difficult because this kind of steam system, it's super very loud, and so journalists market that they tried to plug use some plugs in theirs, but it didn't help. Didn't help at all. But I don't know what to say.
No, I mean, I think it's let's probably like really give an introduction of what kind of idea is that. So the idea is that is that it's a piece, actually, really, like, I think the specific thing is that this is the piece before, like, which I think is, sort of common for the search and research of the music, what we call a contemporary music. That what is our room and what is our space, and like where, in that case, where is important, because I think you cannot imagine Bach outside of the specific acoustic of a church. It's the same way, like if you look at Mozart's music, so there's less reverberation, so there's many things like, like if you take Mozart to the Gregorian chapels, that it would be pointless, because that would die to death. So the space is the place, it plays an incredible role. This is what we do in the acousmonium. Actually, we create the space, with the acoustic space. So this is, I think, for me, the specific sort of insight, from the someone like Avraamov, like before it came to the electronic era, before we came to the loudspeakers. So could you tell us about that? The idea is that the whole city is actually is the space.
Yeah, it's a good question, a good topic to speak, because after revolution in Russia, there was like a lot of artists thought about to make art somewhere else, not only in the concert halls, on the streets, for many people. And it was in some programs, a concept for the future art in some articles at that time. And also some poets wrote some a text about which was inspired by this idea. For example, Gastev Order number 6. He wrote that the whole our planet should be like a musical instrument, and they started it from the Asia should be play D, and Africa, I don't know, C chord, and so on, and then pause, one month's pause, and then crescendo for whole planet, and so on. And Avraamov was not alone this time. And for me, this project, this Avraamov project, starts this kind of project, musical project. For example, which we have now, like a Stockhausen helicopter quartet, So it's something unique, something, and he also used a very unusual instrument for his composition. It's also very specific thing, I think, and he generated a really crazy ideas at that time. So, for example, just after revolution, he proposed Lenin through the Lunacharsky. Lunacharsky was a culture minister. And he proposed Lenin to collect all pianos and burn it.
That's actually, that reflects. I mean, it's not that he was a maniac or something, but for me, this is more about his research into the microtonal, system, in order to synthesize. Because for him, like this that was a mistake, not made, but like sort of constituted by Bach with a well-tempered clavier. That to Avraamov, Bach was the biggest killer of the music. Not for me, I have to say. I love Bach very, very much. Daniel recomposes after Bach. He also played a little bit of it here, and he'll play even more of it in St. Petersburg. It's called Symphonische Träume. Yeah, this piece. And but for Avraamov, Bach was
it was against of a temperated European temperated system. Yeah,
well temperated.
It was against that. But can you imagine if we collect I don't know 100 pianos and burn it? For example, it's. Well, I mean, I think it could be beautiful project.
It's like you bring two ideas to the minister or to the official, and then one is completely weird, so you know that he will or she will just like really say, "Oh, come on, what the hell is that?" But the second, comparing to the first one, looks okay. So I think that was that. And so Avraamov brought two proposals to the minister. Yeah, he said, first, let's burn all the pianos, and second, let's make a siren symphony. And then Lunacharsky said, yeah, I mean, burning all the pianos, sorry, because Lenin loves Beethoven, you know? We should be careful.
Like that. Yeah.
So let's better make the second one. And this is how he got the support to make the siren, the Symphony of Industrial Force. That's what we know from this, the memoirs of the friends.
Yeah. And then, so continue to his ideas found in the Museum of Glinka in Moscow. Very interesting information in his archive. And I think it was 1926 or 27, he wrote that it will be great to, he wrote that steam, it's old-fashioned. We have to use electricity. We have to install on the many Zeppelins very big loudspeakers, and to make a new symphony for city with this kind of stuff. And almost the same time he wrote it should be very good to create something like we call today studio of electronic music. He wrote we need many loudspeakers, we need microphones, we need we have to use all science, power of science to work for the sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. But I mean, he was absolutely. I mean, I think the guy was obviously like a omnidirectional genius. And not just in music and arts, he was also, I mean, music journalist and theorist and circus. He was working in the circus at some point. Musicologist, anthropologist, and ethnographist. Crazy. The Renaissance. I mean, was this the Society of Leonardo da Vinci also?
He was a very adventure person, I would say. So it reminds me a bit like 20th century Richard Wagner, because he also has a lot of he got a lot of money from his friends, travel a lot, and then a lot of child and so on. And about the symphony, his symphony. So there is no scores in his symphony. He did it structure like an order how to play this symphony. It was one variant. It was he created in Baku, 1922, and for the second performance it was in Moscow. It was a bit. I like this second variant more because the form of the piece is. I find it better, and we have some documentation about his symphony from Baku, because there in that time there was Lydia Ivanova, the daughter of the poet Всеволод Ivanov, and she was a child this time, and she wrote memoirs about these days, and she also called this symphony of sirens in translation, and she also called the horns sirens. It's like it was a mistake, but yeah. Anyway, and she wrote, Avraamov was very happy in the beginning of when symphony he started. He built this very big space, how to say it, term for the conductor, where he conducted symphony. And the first part of the symphony, it was like counted by canon. So this first canon, the starts this factory, this factory, this factory, the second canon, another factory, and so on. And,
I mean, I think at this point, I'm sorry to interrupt you, because we should explain the picture that everybody knows. We also used it for our announcements and for the video, that there's Arseny Avraamov standing with the flags on the top of the building. So he was a conductor, and then it's just like he took the biggest, I don't know, like home or house on the neighborhood, just to hoping that he's kind of seen by the people. Yeah,
it was in Moscow. It was a power station. In Baku, it was he built this kind of stand. I don't know how to say it, like a stand. And then they spontaneously came ship, and they stopped the cannon. So the cannon couldn't shoot because there was a ship on the I don't know, that was military ship or it was trading ship. I don't know.
You mean, of course, you're talking now about the Baku experience.
Yeah, Baku, the first performance.
Yeah, because I mean, what I also heard that he preferred Baku because there's a Caspian Sea. Yeah, and then he wanted to shoot like the biggest gun. And that was only possible in Moscow because there's a city, but like Baku, he wanted to shoot the gun towards the sea. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why the symphony was performed, let's say, not like Avraamov planned, because they cannot count it with the canon. And but anyway, she brought Avraamov at the end. Also was very happy and very enthusiastic. And the next year he did it. 1923 did it this symphony in Moscow.
Yeah.
So it's actually it's for me it's crazy. So I can imagine it only in like post-revolutional country where it's like a lot of house and you can do some crazy stuff.
There's a kind of little corridor, like a window of opportunities to make some kind of very experimental. But at this point I wanted to ask Daniel, as a great specialist of, in particular, of the acousmonium as well. It's like, Daniel, but for the acousmonium, everybody is always trying to create a sort of not a sweet spot, but let's say, a room, like a space where it's optimal to be. Yeah. So it's not too far from that. It's more or less like in the center that you're here, and that sounds the best. Yeah. So what do you think about just, reading and hearing and about this idea of Avraamov? Because to me, of course, I've never been to the performance as such, but like obviously there is no such thing as a sweet spot or anything close to optimal. So wherever you are, as an audience, as a performer, actually Avraamov, I think one of his ideas, I understand, was that nobody is just 100% an audience, so everybody is more or less a performer. Yeah, but nevertheless, there is no such thing as a sweet spot. No such thing as an optimal spot, so you don't really hear it in the same way as anybody else. Nobody really hears that in the same way as anybody else would hear, especially somebody else on the other side of the city, right?
So let me correct you in a little thing. Okay, you spoke of sweet spot. And in a sound projection system like the acousmonium, somebody is projecting the sound and he is in what one thinks is the best place. So if there really was a perfect sweet spot, then concert should be for only one person. because
sometimes it's like that.
Sometimes it's like that. It intends that all the other people don't listen to the same thing. But the same thing happens everywhere. The same thing happens with the orchestra. And what you call the sweet spot is not a concentrated point. It's a region. And this region can be quite big. If you put 800 people in a hall, well, your sweet spot is very large. First thing. And second thing, it doesn't mean that if you're sitting at one side of the hall, on the right side, for example, you will not listen to things that are on the other side. Listening happens everywhere with different points of view. Of course, if you're sitting and you have a loudspeaker stuck to your ear, you will only listen to that loudspeaker. But that's why we always leave some distance between audience and loudspeakers. But the interest is, and for example, when I rehearse a piece, I sit in different locations to have an idea how the music sounds in that location or somewhere else. But the sweet spot is really very large, and you can listen well to music in many, many, many different points. So that's very important. Now, going back to the Symphony of Industrial Horns, it must have been a marvelous experience. Because, of course, Avraamov was standing in a central location. It didn't mean he had the best listening point. He had the best visual point, where everybody was supposed to see him. I also understand that there were other people that were giving sub-orders to the, let's call them, performers in order to play. It is clear that wherever you were in the city, your listening point was different. But there is not a unique reality of music listening. There are as many realities as listeners there are. And there's another example of something similar to this. There's an anecdote by Charles Ives, the American composer that was living at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th, who wrote a very unique and personal music. And he once said that one of his greatest impressions was when he was in his town on the 4th of July, the national feast in the States, and there were two musical bands coming from the two ends of the street, and he was in the middle. And for him, it was one of the most marvelous experiences, how all those sounds blended. Of course, for many people, that is chaotic, but for him, it was a musical inspirer. Then he tried to reconstruct that with his music. Huh? Yeah. So let me tell you something about Schaeffer. What Avraamov did is one of the most extraordinary things, because the main interest of what you did is to listen to everyday sounds from a musical point of view. Listen to a siren, not as a siren, but as a continuous sound that, as Sergey explained, goes up and down and changes pitch. Well, it is a sound, after all. The cannons, the horns, and how he imagined that these sounds put together could create a kind of new sound.
Coherence.
This is why I insist that his work is not an anecdotal work. He doesn't want to show the industry. He wants people to listen to these sounds and see how, combining them, he can create something different. Now, Schaeffer in 1948, he made a famous study called the Étude au chemin de fer, the train study. So in order, and he explains this in his book written in 1952, in order to make this work, he went to a train station and got 5 or 6 locomotives. There were steam locomotives in those days. And then he put the different tape recorders, the different disc recorders, because they were recorded disc. And then he kind of made signals to the locomotives so that they will throw steam or blow the whistle and things like that. He says that very quickly all the conductors of the locomotives became bored of the exercise after the 3rd or 4th time. So with this, he built this, and then recordings on the trains, he built his famous train etude. The problem is that you call it a train study. So when a work is called a train study or the Symphony of Industrial Horns, your mind prepares itself to listen to that. And when you listen to Pierre Schaeffer's train study, one could say you're listening to a documentary about trains. But it's not at all that. It's a rhythmic study of the sounds made by the wheels when they turn, takatan, 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 tan, tan, takatan, takatan, takatak, and then several theirs overcrossing in a polyrhythmic perspective. But of course, our mind blocks itself with the word train. And it's very difficult to listen to it from a musical point of view. And the same thing happens with the symphony. I really enjoyed it, but from a musical point of view, let's forget the planes, the boats, the sirens, the choir, the organ, the etc., etc. Just let's concentrate on how it sounds. And Sergey, your mixing work is excellent, because you can build up the density of many horns, for example, on an ensemble together, or you can build the complexity of the internationale being played by in different moments by different means, and then have a silence, a density, big moments, slow moments, even and you little by little you forget the context. This is very difficult, and it was probably impossible in those days for most of the people. And I really don't know how Avraamov himself listened to it as a documentary of the sounds of the city or as a musical work. In any case, in both cases, as a representation of the sounds of the city and as a musical work, I find it really extraordinary.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. I just followed the Avraamov instruction order. Yeah, there was some problem for the reconstruction, because in his order there was written that should be contrapoint between two songs, International and Varshavianka. But it's actually impossible to do for this kind of reconstruction, because you need a lot of money to make a recording of all stuff. And another way, he also, when he brought this instruction, when he proposed it to perform around the world, this piece, he brought that it's not necessary to follow this order. You can organize this symphony as you can organize it. So
yeah,
it's not necessary to use all stuff. He was in Ban from one side he was the dreamer, and the other side he was a realist.
Yeah, of course, that's clear.
And
anyway, excellent work.
Yeah, and I was want also to say that Avraamov made like a rehearsal of the symphony. It was 1919 in Nizhny Novgorod. He was in depot. There was many trains, and he asked the guys who working there to play train horns or whistles, and yeah, that was like a rehearsal for his symphony.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are way too many parallels to just like pretend that they are not, because like I think first of all, it's like that there's two people, like, you know, Schaeffer and Avraamov, like the Renaissance people. Second, both looking into the the nature, yeah, what is the sound phenomenon and how it can be created.
Absolutely.
And on and on, and also like
absolutely.
There's another stuff like also like both were I mean, of course, Schaeffer had like years and collective of people to work on the theory and to really create a great sort of body of work to really outline the future, actually, you know, like Darwin, that this is where the music would go, is the sound recording, actually. And something Avraamov was also like trying to touch. Yeah, it's another parallel, like I say, there's way too many parallels, is that they both worked with the city. And I want you to tell us about Schaeffer experience that not so many people actually know about. It has to do with the war, yeah, because there was a civil war in Russia before the Soviet Union, and there was the Second World War in Paris.
Absolutely.
So this is like, for me, obviously, like if you look at these guys, it's not that they just went to the conservatory or the music school and then had a great teacher, great theory, but
it is true that both of them are really unusual persons. I mean, unusual because they arrived to music, but their initial road was not music. I understand that Avraamov, when he left Russia, he worked as a clown, or he worked in a circus, or he did something that had nothing to do with music. And then he came back, he made the symphony. Why did he make the symphony? Was it only a musical or sound project?
No.
Or was it also a political action in which, you know well that after the Soviet revolution, there was an industrialization problem in Russia, how to develop industry. And was this symphony a way to promote industry? What was the political intention behind Avramov's actions? In any case, then we go to Schaeffer. Schaeffer was an engineer in telecommunications, not music. And he worked in the domain of telecommunications. He worked in the radio for all his life. And then he came quite accidentally through music, because he liked music. He had a musical teaching, and he started experimenting more on the drama side of radio than on the musical side. So he did that for many years. So while he was doing that, in the beginning of the 40s, he was a resistant against the Germans. And he, in parallel to his activity as radio drama producer, they mounted, of course, a hidden radio transmitter, so that when the moment came, they could transmit.
You can say that Schaeffer is one of the first radio pirates.
Exactly. Because they also built the transmitter in the same place they were making radio dramas. They could make transmissions once Paris would be under liberation, let's say. So finally, in 1944, when the Americans arrived to Paris, he used the transmitter, he himself. And you may not know, nobody knows that as a part of the German occupation, churches were not allowed to ring their bells.
It's actually very funny because, you know, in the Soviet Union, it was exactly the opposite.
You see? And so when Paris was about to be freed, he transmitted for the first time, asking all the priests in the church to ring their bells simultaneously to announce that Paris was being freed.
Pirates connected to the churches. Kind of weird if you just think about it.
And I don't think there was any, or maybe musical intention behind this.
This is because Shafir later switched to the media studies. Yeah, I would say that this is a great example of a practical sort of action, in the sense of like informing like people, the whole city ringing, which would be only one-way meaning for everybody in Paris, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there's little information about this. I mean, information meaning how did people react? Did people understand what was happening? How many churches were there involved? All those things, we don't know them because it was a very difficult moment. At the same time he was saying this, there was fighting in the streets.
Yeah.
There were many Germans hidden in the top of the buildings, shooting to the resistance that was trying to recover Paris. So there's little known about how what was the impact of this. But the intention, in any case, as with Avraamov, was extraordinary. That's what I found extraordinary. And it was a sound experience indeed. He wrote a novel, which is an autobiography.
Yeah.
It's called Prélude, Chorale et Fugue. Prelude, Choral, and Fugue, which tells the story from his birth until La Musique Concrète. It's a really wonderful book. I hope you will read it someday.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Sergey.
Thank you very much.
And it's indeed the time to really get to listen to the piece. And
I really recommend this experience to all the listeners, to have it witness what happened 100 years ago. No, but I was so surprised looking for early Russian composers that to find this, and I started listening, and I said, okay, how comes this is not known? How comes we have never performed this in France, to my knowledge, at least in GRM? So I think we are really doing a homage to this incredible person and making a homage through you, through Sergey, through all the people who are listening. And so now it's a good moment for a listen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.